Ever since Cain and Abel, families as well as nations have been known for their civil wars, most of them with tragic endings. Well, so it was with David's family. David knew how to get along with God, but he never really translated that knowledge into his skills as a parent. That can happen, by the way. So when the prophet Nathan related God's message to David that killing and murder would continually plague David for the rest of his life, well, that was only the beginning. It led to another reality when Absalom created a 4-year strategy to take over the kingdom and murder his father. At this time, David needed his friends more than ever in his life. Our scripture reading sets up the story for how David's friends surrounded him with wise counsel and protection. At times, they risked their own lives in order to retain David's honor as their king. I want to read this story from portions of 2 Samuel chapter 15 out of the Message. Let's begin reading at 2 Samuel 15:1. As time went on, Absalom took to riding in a horse-drawn chariot, with 50 men running in front of him. Early each morning he would take up his post beside the road at the city gate. When anyone showed up with a case to bring to the king for a decision, Absalom would call him over and say, "Where do you hail from?" And the answer would come, "Your servant is from one of the tribes of Israel." Then Absalom would say, "Look, you've got a strong case, but the king isn't going to listen to you." And then he'd say, "Why doesn't someone make me a judge for this country? Anybody with a case could bring it to me, and I'd settle things fair and square." Whenever someone would treat him with special honor, he'd shrug it off and treat him like an equal, making him feel important. Absalom did this to everyone who came to do business with the king, and stole the hearts of everyone in Israel. After 4 years of this, Absalom spoke to the king, "Let me go to Hebron to pay a vow that I made to God. Your servant made a vow when I was living in Geshur in Aram, saying, 'If God will bring me back to Jerusalem, I'll serve him with my life.' The king said, 'Go with my blessing.' And he got up and set off for Hebron. Then Absalom sent undercover agents to all the tribes of Israel with the message, 'When you hear the blast of the ram's horn trumpet, that's your signal. Shout, Absalom is king in Hebron.' 200 men went with Absalom from Jerusalem, but they had been called together knowing nothing of the plot and made the trip innocently. While Absalom was offering sacrifices, he managed also to involve Ahithophel the Gilonite, David's advisor, calling him away from his hometown of Gilo. The conspiracy grew powerful, and Absalom's supporters multiplied. Someone came to David with the report, "The whole country has taken up with Absalom." "Up and out of here," called David to all his servants who were with him in Jerusalem. "We've got to run for our lives, or none of us will escape Absalom. Hurry! He's about to pull the city down around our ears and slaughter us all." The king's servants said, "Whatever our master the king says, we will do. We're with you all the way." So the king and his entire household escaped on foot. The king left 10 concubines behind to tend to the palace. And so they left, step by step by step, and then paused at the last house as the whole army passed by him. All the Kerethites, all the Pelethites, and the 600 Gittites who had marched with him from Gath went past. Now verse 23, the whole country was weeping in loud lament as all the people passed by. As the king crossed the brook Kidron, the army headed for the road to the wilderness. Zadok was also there, the Levites with him, carrying God's chest of the covenant. They set the chest of God down, Abiathar standing by, until all the people had evacuated the city. Then the king ordered Zadok, "Take the chest back to the city. If I get back in God's good graces, he'll bring me back and show me where the chest has been set down. But if he says, I'm not pleased with you. Well, he can then do with me whatever he pleases. The king directed Zadok the priest, here's the plan. Return to the city peacefully, with Ahimaaz, your son, and Jonathan, Abiathar's son, with you. I'll wait at a spot in the wilderness across the river until I get word from you telling us what's up. So Zadok and Abiathar took the chest of God back to Jerusalem and placed it there, while David went up the Mount of Olives, weeping, head covered, but barefooted. And the whole army was with him, heads covered, and weeping as they ascended. I'd like to talk with you about the importance of friendship, the very great value of having a few friends to help you in the hard times. Samuel Taylor Coleridge was a melancholic genius. Born in Devonshire in England, the youngest in a family of 13. It's enough to make anybody melancholy. Born into a clergyman's home, he became early on obviously gifted, and the critics of English literature will certainly agree that his contributions were virtually immeasurable. He was a man that had a tough life, victimized by rheumatism, which he tried to solve with opium, became addicted, and was a lonely man, married but was not happily married, found a friend in a man named Wordsworth. If you love poetry, that name ought to ring a neat bell. And he and Wordsworth were closer, frankly, than he and his wife. In fact, unfortunately, he fell in love with Wordsworth's sister-in-law, and his marriage, it was already shaky, just about destroyed. He was an addict almost before he was 30 years old, and though he died in his 60s, he died in a doctor's care. He never could get away from that habit, trying to settle the voices down inside to give him purpose. He, of course, contributed The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, magnificent piece, but I think among his best is a work that's never publicized. It's called Youth and Age. And in it is a line that says, "Naught cared this body for wind or weather when youth and I lived in it together." But that's not the best line. The best line is, "Friendship is a sheltering tree." I think of a friend and a few friends that make up friendship as great trees, leafy limbs that come around us and spread themselves over us and bring us shade from the sun, the blast of adversity, winter's wind of loneliness. A great sheltering tree, that's a friend. You know, we have really been taught the wrong thing with regard to independence in the family of God. I was taught it for years. I was taught that if you are really mature, you don't need anybody else. Just barrel on through life, and it's the weak person that needs somebody. And I never could get around the fact that Jesus had 12. 3 of them were intimate friends. Why did he have friends if what I was being taught was true? Well, the fact is I was not being taught the truth. In fact, I said to Cynthia recently, you know, honey, the way we were taught for so many years in this particular church, we've had to unlearn most everything. And maybe you've been taught that it's a sign of weakness and immaturity to have a friend or to need a friend. That is not true. It's a sign of immaturity to think you don't need a friend, frankly. Friends are like sheltering trees. Now I want to lay some thoughts on you before we even get into 2 Samuel 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, along that area in David's life. I want to share with you some of the overflow of thoughts I've gotten with regard to friends. In fact, the word friends or friendly or friendship those words appear over 100 times in the Scriptures.
God says a lot about friends. And I'd like to tell you what I feel from Scripture 4 of those things are. First of all, friends are essential. They're not optional. There is no substitute at times in our lives for a friend, someone to care, to listen, to feel, to comfort, and to reprove even. Friends are essential. They're not optional. Second thing I'm discovering is friends must be cultivated. They're not automatic. What does the Bible say? He who has friends must show himself friendly. Reach out. Samuel Johnson wrote this: if a man does not make new acquaintances as he advances through life, he will soon find himself left alone. One should keep his friendships in constant repair. Good word, Sammy. Number 3, friends impact our lives. Friends impact our lives. They are not neutral. If you run with good friends, you become a better person. You run with poor friends, you become worse. 1 Corinthians 15:33, be not deceived. Evil company corrupts good morals. Friends impact our lives. They're not neutral. Choose them carefully. Choose them wisely. If you are a gossip, you usually run with gossips. You are a rebel, you pick rebels and you run with a rebel. Or if you run with a rebel, you'll become one. You want to be wise, run with wise people and you become wise. It's amazing how it rubs off. Now, the fourth thing will take a few more minutes to develop. Friends come in 4 classifications, not 1. Let me give them to you. First of all, there are those that I would call acquaintances. That's what most of us are in this church. Let's just face it. Acquaintances are people with whom we have spasmodic contact and superficial interaction, and we don't ask hard questions. We just skate with acquaintances. How are you? Fine, great. I'm really not, but I can't tell you that I'm really not. You're an acquaintance. Friendships come, first of all, in the big classification of acquaintances. Second, casual friends. That's the next group. Next level down, we have casual friends. And with these people, we have more contact, we have common interests, we have more specific questions we're free to ask, and every once in a while we will even seek the opinion of a person who is a casual friend. Does that help a little? There are some people who are more than acquaintances, but they're not close. So there's a safe distance. However, it's not quite the skating that the acquaintance is. Here's the third, close friends. In close friendships, you have similar life goals, and you're free to ask some hard questions. You occasionally will do mutual projects together. They're the people you play handball with, people you play tennis with, people you lift weights with. They're people you do things with, you take vacations with on occasion. You are a little closer with these people, but they're not as close as the fourth, and that's intimate friends. Okay, hold on. These are intimate friends, people with whom we have regular contact, a deep commitment in mutual character development. We are not only open, but we anxiously await their counsel and their reproof. We are free to criticize, free to correct, and absolutely free to embrace and encourage, because there is a built-in mutual understanding. Now let me illustrate a diagram as you go down those 4 levels. They're in the form of, first of all, a V. And if you want to put that somewhere on that sheet, great. Put the word numbers at the top of that one and make the V look like this. If somebody came in right now, they'd wonder, what in the world are we doing in this place? Okay, numbers begin to be less and less and less and less the more you become intimate with an individual. In other words, you have many, many, many acquaintances, You have a number of casual friendships. You have less and yet perhaps a broader number of close friends. You have very, very few intimate friends. Isn't that true? If you know what's good for you, you don't have many intimate friends. You can't trust that many people. You have a few, very few people, maybe 1, 2, sometime as many as 3 with whom you can absolutely unveil the truth of your life. I'm sorry to say, sometimes that individual is not your mate. Ideally, it's true, but sometimes it's not. All right, you have less and less in numbers. Now, invert it. Make it look like a rooftop in the snow country. Sharp peak, okay? And put over that the word honesty. You are less honest with your acquaintance, a little more honest with your casual friends, a good deal more honest with your close friends, and totally honest with your intimate friends. You see why I say there are not many of them? There are precious few people with whom you can be that honest. Now, let me tell you the tragedy. Some of you have no intimate friends. You're the loneliest people here in this study at this time. Not even one with whom you can be just out front, honest, open with. And that's why life's so tough. Now, as we look at 2 Samuel chapter 15, we're going to find a man who had not only a sheltering tree, but he had a grove of them. And you won't know any of those names. Maybe the last name. But I challenge anybody here to say, yeah, I really know about that person. I've done a study on that life. Here we go now. Let me show you the situation in which David found himself. Let me give you 3 things just briefly. First of all, personally, he was virtually destroyed by guilt. He had gone into Bathsheba, and we've studied that. He had killed Bathsheba's husband. We've studied that. He had lived like a hypocrite for a year. We studied that. He lost his baby. Studied that. His whole world began to crumble. So personally, he was really under the gun. Psalm 51, Psalm 32, both tell us that's true. Second, domestically, his home was shattered. A son rapes a sister. A boy rebels and leads a conspiracy against the throne. His name is Absalom. We're going to read about it in just a few minutes. And lo and behold, David is literally driven from the throne, and he loses touch with family. And that's the third. His political career is destroyed. The only people that can fully appreciate that are those of you that for some unfair and unknown reason were suddenly fired from a job you loved. And just out of a bolt out of the blue, boom, you're through. And the withdrawals are incredibly strong. You thought that being free from the work would give you some measure of relief, but in fact, you've lost a sense of identity. That's tough. Now, that's David. Personally and domestically and politically, he's hurting. Chapter 15, it came about after this that Absalom provided for himself a chariot and horses and 50 men as runners before him. You're going to read about the beginning of a conspiracy. Absalom used to rise early and stand beside the way to the gate. And it happened that when any man had a suit to come to the king for judgment, Absalom would call to him and say, "From what city are you?" And he would say, "Your servant is from one of the tribes of Israel." And Absalom would say, See, your claims are good and right, but no man listens to you on the part of the king. Moreover, he would say, "Oh, that one would appoint me judge in the land. Then every man who has any suit or cause could come to me, and I would give him justice." Sounds like he's running for office, doesn't it? That's exactly what he's doing, except his running is illegal. His daddy's on the throne, and he's down there at the peripheral area when people come in with their suits and needing counsel. They bring these lawsuits with them, and they come to seek the counsel of the king. And Absalom says, wait a minute, there's nobody up there that cares for what you've got to say. But I do. Oh, that someone would see the value of my wisdom and let me come into that office. I'd show you what justice is all about. Verse 5, and it happened that when a man came near to prostrate himself before him, he would put out his hand and take hold of him and kiss him. And in this manner, Absalom dealt with all Israel who came to the king for judgment. So Absalom stole away the hearts of the men of Israel. It worked. And little by little, he etched away on that big rock of granite until finally he got a cave built. He got his people together and he says, I am your man. Verse 10, so Absalom sent spies throughout all the tribes of Israel, saying, as soon as you hear the sound of the trumpet, then you shall say, Absalom is king in Hebron. And that's exactly what they did. The blast of the trumpet, and he was on his way. Verse 13, messenger came to David saying, boy, this must have been hard to hear. The hearts of the men of Israel are with Absalom, David. And it's with a sigh that this good man, broken, fractured in his spirit, feeling like there's not a friend around, said to all his servants who were with him at Jerusalem, arise and let us flee. He knew his son, for otherwise none of us shall escape from Absalom. Go in haste. Hurry up now, lest he overtake us quickly and bring down calamity on us and strike the city with the edge of the sword. He'll set this place on fire. I know that boy. So get your things together and let's go. Now picture the scene. Here's this good king who's done a super job. In the last few months, there's been a breakdown in leadership, but good man. And all of a sudden, his son is moving in, and the troops are surrounding that area, and they're grabbing things out of the cupboards and putting them in bags and laying them on the backs of the horses and the donkeys, and they're on their way out of the city, running for their lives. There's a revolution led by the king's son. Now, does David need a sheltering tree? Oh, man. If ever a man did, he did. Now watch it happen. The king's servants, verse 15, said to the king, your servants are ready to do whatever my lord the king chooses. So the king went out, all his household with him. Verse 17, the king went out and all the people with him. And they stopped at the last house. Boy, there's a lot of feeling in that. Came out of the city, great city of Zion, and they came just to the edge and they looked back over that great place that David had seen God build. Oh, man, his heart must have been broken. He stood at the last house, and there was kind of a pass in review. Few women, children, few of his belongings on the back of these beasts of burden, and they're running for their lives. Maybe you're there. The last house. That would have been a good title for this message. Hey, he needed a tree to give him some shelter. So do you. Just somebody that'll say, David, I'm there with you. I don't have the answer, but man, my heart goes out to you. When the chips are down and there's nobody to applaud and you run out of armor and there's no more ammunition and the lights are out, God sends a sheltering tree. I want you to see them. Here are 5 of them. Here we go. Now these names are going to blow you away. Verse 17. Stopped at the last house. All his servants passed on beside him. All the Kerethites, all the Pelethites, and all the Gittites, 600 men who had come with him from Gath, passed on before the king. They're just going by. He's just standing there alone. Then the king said to Ittai the Gittite, as our first friend. Ittai the Gittite. That sounds like he's from Hunger. Man, where's he been? Well, he's a friend of the king. But you'll never know it because he never gets in the limelight until the chips are down and he's at the last house and there's no more throne, no more glory. Suddenly he comes out of the woodwork and he says, pal, I'm with you. I'm with you. It's an amazing thing to me. He's a Gittite. Why will you go with us, says David. Got him by the shoulders, perhaps. Return and remain with that king, Absalom. You're a foreigner and also an exile. Return to your own place. You know what a Gittite was? It's a man from Gath. Does that ring any bells? Who was from Gath? A few Bible students here tonight. Goliath was from Gath. Well, what's he got? 600 guys and a leader named Ittai from Gath. Why are they there? Well, remember, David's a champion. He's swept into Philistia and he's brought into exile some of those people from Gath. But you know what's happened since he's brought them into his camp? They've fallen in love with him. And the leader, Ittai, he's not going to go live down there with Absalom. He's a friend, you see. And he says to David, in effect, I stand with you, my friend. Life or death, I'm here. Listen to his words. You know, David says, take off. This is your chance to run. Go on back. 20, David says, you came only yesterday. Shall I today make you wander with us? While I go where I will, return and take back your brothers. Mercy and truth be with you. Shalom, brother. Go on. Get away. It's going to be hard where I'm going. And Ittai, this friend, answered and said, as the Lord lives, as my Lord the King lives, wherever my Lord the King may be, whether for death or for life, there also your servant will be. That's a friend. Remember this little diagram? He's way down that area, way down there. He's an intimate friend. He says, David, if they string you up, I'm putting my neck in the noose with you. If they feed you to the dogs, I'm with you. If the whole world turns against you, I'm there. I support you. Boy, there are not many friends like that. Here's this broken king standing alone, and Ittai the Gittite walks up and says, I'm with you. I support you. Well, that would be great if he were all alone, but he's not. In fact, David says, verse 22, go and pass over. So Ittai the Gittite passed over with all his men, all the little ones who were with him. They brought families. So Ittai says, come on, Gittites, let's go. So they go over the hill and they leave Zion and they're on their way with the king to some place, no man's land, without any promise, but he's with his friend. When everything else fails, everybody else is turned away, there will be precious few that will give you a call and say, I'm with you. I'm there. Count on me. I won't kick you when you're down. I understand. Sometime, amazing, it might be a person from Gath, a person who some time ago had been an enemy, but now had come full circle and realized you really are a person of integrity. Okay, second. Now, if Ittai the Gittite isn't bad enough, look at verse 23. While the country was weeping with a loud voice, all the people passed over. The king passed over the brook Kidron, and all the people passed over toward the way of the wilderness. Now behold, there he is. Isn't this fun? All these people just kind of jumping out of the Bible. This guy's name is Zadok. Ever done a Bible study on Zadok? Looks like a misprint, doesn't it? Zadok. Zadok came and all the Levites carrying the Ark of the Covenant, and they set down the Ark of God, and here's the second friend. Here's the next friend, Abiathar. These guys run together, by the way. They fall into classification B on your outline. Ittai the Gittite is A. Zadok and Abiathar are second. And they came up with until all the people had finished passing from the city. So we got people passing, leaving the city, and here come these two guys hauling the Ark, this piece of furniture from Jerusalem, and they come right up to David, and they set that thing down. And they look at David, and he looks at them, and they say, where do we go from here? We're with you, David. Zadok and Abiathar, we've been with you all along. These are priests. These are representatives of God who minister in the house of God. Now, notice what David says to them. He doesn't say, let's go together. He asks them a favor. Now mark that. Verse 25. The king said to them, return the ark of God to the city. If I find favor in the sight of the Lord, then he will bring me back again and show me both it and his habitation. Look at the next verse on sovereignty. But if God should say thus, I have no delight in you, behold, here I am. Let him do to me as seems good to him. That is a teachable spirit. That's how to ride out the whirlwind of consequences. Lord, if you choose to finish me off, I'm available. If you want to use me, I'm thrilled. But I'm exposed to you, and I abandon my future into your hands. And Zadok and Abiathar hear him say, take that ark back to the city. See, David knew that his son wasn't walking with God and probably would not begin. And for all he knew, the presence of that piece of furniture and the ministry of Zadok and Abiathar would be enough to turn his heart around. At least it was worth a try. And so he says to those men, hey, why don't you go back to the city? And why don't you minister there? You're needed there. And that's exactly what they did. The king said, are you not the seer? Verse 27, aren't you a prophet? Return to the city in peace with your 2 sons. See, I'm going to wait at the forge in the wilderness until word comes from you to inform me. So Zadok and Abiathar returned the ark of God to Jerusalem and remained there. They had some things to lose, by the way. Raymond Brown, in his fine little book, Skillful Hands, a biography of David, writes this. Their duty at that moment was to obey their friend and to trust his wisdom. It meant that they were going into a life of hardship and insecurity, privation, suffering, and possibly death. But they would do as their friend asks, and that would be enough. Sometime when you are really in need, you will have a few friends who will say to you, I'll do whatever you wish. I'm available. And they're the Zadoks and Abiathars of your life. No one will ever know about them, but they'll run interference for you. They'll be down there in the front lines where it isn't really pleasant, protecting you from the blast. And they've got their necks way out, shielding and encouraging you in their presence. By just their presence there. That's a friend. A different kind of role to fill, but they're willing to do it. Now, verse 30. David went up the ascent of the Mount of Olives and wept as he went. Boy, this is a broken man. His head was covered and he walked barefoot. Boy, picture that king. Barefooted, head covered. Looked like a tramp. And all the people who were with him each covered his head and went up weeping as they went. Verse 32. Here's the third friend. It happened as David was coming to the summit where God was worshipped, that behold, Hushai the Archite. Who is Hushai? Oh, you get that? Who is Hushai? Hushai. Well, verse 37 says he's David's friend. That's all it says. You won't read anything else about Hushai of any significance. He's his buddy. And Hushai the Archite, what does he do? Oh, was he important? He met David with his coat torn and had dust on his head. Now, he hadn't been in a fight. That's what men did in those days to express total bankruptcy. That's why Job tore his garments and sat in this pile and threw dust on his head. It was as if to say, I have nothing else. I am bankrupt. And this Hushai was so touched with David's feelings, he met David and bore the marks of this compassionate feeling, and David spotted it. You know, you can spot a friend that understands. Just in their presence. I was with an individual just this weekend who had lost a daughter. He's a pastor. And he was ministering to some in that city where he is. Several of them have lost children. And I said to him, oh, what do you do? Tell me what you do when you minister to those who have suffered such losses. What do you say? He says, oh, Chuck, I don't say anything. I just embrace them. I'm just there. I said, that's exactly my philosophy. Sometime when the pain is so great and you have come to the last house and there is no one to understand, that person, that Hushai, comes and with his presence wraps himself or herself around you. That says all that needs to be said. He's there. He's there. So David gave him a very significant task. Verse 33, he says, if you pass over with me, you'll be a burden. Now you see, he would have been offended if that had been an acquaintance. But when you've got a close or intimate friend, they're not offended at that. He says, no, you don't come with me. That'll be a burden. If you return to the city and say to Absalom, I'll be your servant, O king, as I've been your father's servant in time past, so I'll now be your servant, then you can thwart the counsel of Ahithophel for me. Who in the world is Ahithophel? Well, he's a counselor of Absalom. And what he's saying is this: I'm going to set up a strategy of spying. And Hushai, the best thing you can become is a turncoat. You can look like you're a friend of Absalom, but you will be the checkpoint. You will be the supply line of communication from the very central headquarters of Absalom's military establishment all the way out to where I'm going to be bivouacked, out here on the hillside. And we'll set up a chain of command so that that information that comes from the heart of the king, Absalom, will pass through messengers one by one, first with your lips and then all the way to my ears. And then we will find a way to turn that throne against him. And that is exactly what happens in chapter 17. As a matter of fact, I made a list of the names involved in that communication line that led to the overthrow of Absalom. Listen to them. Hushai, Zadok, Abiathar, an unknown girl who took a message, Jonathan, Ahimaaz, an unnamed woman who hid 2 messengers in a disguised well, and finally, the errand boy that ran the message to David. Why in the world would I take the time to list that bunch of people? Because they are friends, none of which will ever be in the limelight in any biography you'll read in the life of David, and I've read them. Nobody bothers to cover this segment of David's life. But this was when the chips were down, the last house, the last ditch. He has nobody around, and he says to Hushai, listen, you're my friend. You fake it. You act like you're Absalom's follower, and you get the information, and by, we will turn this thing against him. And that's exactly what happened. Okay, you with us? Ittai the Gittite, Zadok and Abiathar, Hushai the, what was he? Archite, Hushai the Archite. Now here's a fourth one. Look at chapter 17, verse 27. And now, I love this bunch. There are 3 of them. Great guys. Shobi, Machir, and Barzillai. Lots of luck on the spelling. 17:27. Now here they are. David had come to Mahanaim. If you check your concordance, you'll find out the first mention of Mahanaim is in Genesis 32:1, where angels came and ministered to Jacob. And here we have David out in the middle of nowhere, Mahanaim, and these angels come in the form of 3 men. 3 men, and look at what they do. Shobi, the son of Nahash of Rabbah, the son of Ammon. Son of Ammon, that's an enemy of David. Remember that. Machir, the son of Ammiel from Lo-debar. Remember that. And Barzillai, the Gileadite from, I can't pronounce that, brought these things, beds, basins, pottery, wheat, barley, flour, grain, beans, lentils, parched seeds, honey, curds, sheep, and cheese. They put all of that in a crock pot, and they brought all of that to David, and they says, hey, pal, here's the sleeping bags. Here's china, says pottery. They fed all those troops out there, and they dumped all that good stuff on them, and cheese, and neat food. And you know why? Because the people were hungry and weary and thirsty in the wilderness. That's when a friend comes through. Hey, you know, David wasn't the type to wave a big flag and say, we're hungry. Shobi, help us out, pal. But you see, when you got a friend like this, he knows you're hungry. He knows you're thirsty. He knows you don't have a bed. Beautiful thing about close friends is they don't have to be told. They're there. Oh, man, that's good stuff. I love it. I see it so practically in our Christian life, and we make it so theologically impeccable that nobody cares. It's just good exposition. Friends, this is good living. This is what you do when the bills come due and the bottom drops out and there's nobody else around. You got somebody that comes to your door and says, we got a good job. No reason in the world we ought to keep all this money. Hey, you take this. You guys can use that. Or a friend that says, you're coming? Hey, stay here. It doesn't matter. We'll pack the kids up. You just put in here. We love you. Let's go eat. And they don't take you to the Golden Arches. Man, they take you to some super joint where they just lay the feed bag on you. That's a friend. Are we on the same frequency? Some of you look at me tonight like, where in the world are you, Chuck? Hey, gang, this is it. This is rubber meet the road Christianity. This is where we got to pull it off. When there's nobody else around that'll do it, this is when we come through. I'll tell you, we Christians will kick them when they're down, but there's a precious few that'll reach down and say, my friend, get on your feet. I'm there. You can't run me away. Now, did they have reasons not to come? All right, hang on. Shobi from the sons of Ammon could have said, oh, David has fought the Ammonites and he has been so cruel, there's no way I'm going to take a hot dog to David. That's what Shobi could have thought. Well, how about Micah? Micah, verse 27. Let me dig into your memory bank for a moment. See where he's from? He's the son of Amiel from Lo-Debar. Who was in Lo-Debar? Come on. Huh? Come on. Who was in Lo-Debar? Mephibosheth. $64,000. That's great. Hey, Mephibosheth. Who in the world's Mephibosheth? Well, I'm glad you... No, I won't go into all of that. Mephibosheth is a super guy. He's a cripple that was kin to Jonathan. He was his son, remember? And because he ran from the throne thinking that his life would be taken, he finally wound up in the middle of the desert. Lo-Debar means no pasture land. And there was one guy that had a house. And he said to this cripple who came up on crutches, oh, you stay here. His name is Micah. Micah's the kind of guy that takes care of people when they're in need. And so Mephibosheth lived there, and Micah could have thought, I've done my thing. I fulfilled my responsibility. David would have to take care of himself. There's one more guy here named Barzillai. You check the next chapter. He's 80 years old. I'm retired. Hey, but he doesn't say that. You know what he says? He says, sure, Shobi. Sure, Micah. Man, we'll get that stuff together. So he kills a few sheep and makes a pile of curds and... Where in the world do curds come from? I think it's the worst sounding stuff in the world. Anybody that eats curds is really hungry, I'll tell you. This guy putting it down. Sheep and curds. Woo! He did it. Well, they loved David. Man, sensitive friends dumped all that stuff on him. And David ate like he's going out of style. And finally, the end of his life, his son dies. Just comes to an abrupt ending. He's dead. And now we find David, man, frying pan into the fire. It's bad already. And he hears that Absalom's been murdered. And the world caves in. He can't get it off his shoulders. In the end of chapter 18, Verse 33, the king, deeply moved, went up to the chamber over the gate and wept. And he said as he walked, "Oh, my son Absalom." He wails, "My son, my son. Would I had died instead of you, my son, my son." It's the end. You've never been there, you can't understand that. Oh. You know what he needs? He needs a friend. And God sends him Joab. David can't get over the grief. He's caught in that trap. Sometimes grief does that to you. You're in a cave and somebody locks the door. You can't get out of that cave. You try your best, you fake it, and you can't do it, and you're still in there, and all of a sudden a friend climbs in. That's Joab. Look at verse 1. It was told Joab, the king is weeping and mourns for Absalom, and the victory that day was turned to mourning for all the people, and the people heard it and said that day, the king is grieved for his son. Now listen, they were seeing it as God's deliverance. God took care of Absalom. David, get back on the throne. Now's your chance. And David is absorbed in grief in the cave, can't go on. It's so dark and it's so empty, and there's nobody around to say, "Come on, David, get back. Your leadership is needed." Joab comes in verse 4, the king covered his face and cried with a loud voice, oh, Absalom. And Joab, verse 5, cared enough to confront. That's a friend. Joab came and said, "Today you've covered with shame the faces of all your servants, who today have saved your life, and the lives of your sons and daughters, the lives of your wives and the lives of your concubines. You have shown today that princes and servants are nothing to you. For I know this day that if Absalom were alive and all of us were dead, you would be pleased. Come on, David, get on your feet. Get over this grief. There's a job to be done." Verse 7, "Go, arise, speak kindly to your servants. I swear by the Lord, if you don't go out, not a man will pass the night with you. It'll be worse for you than all the evil that's come upon you from your youth until now." That's a friend. You've licked your wounds long enough, David. Man, God's come and He's done something that's broken your heart, but friend, it's bigger than a boy. Verse 8, the king arose, sat in the gate. When they told the people, the king is sitting at the gate, the people came before the king. Wow! He's back on target. And there was Joab in that ministry of helping David when he bottomed out. I'll tell you, when I came across this, it just thrilled me to death. I love messages like this because it puts the glory where it belongs, in the Lord's hands as He works through no names. Ittai the Gittite, Zadok, Abiathar, Hushai, Shobi, Machir, Barzillai, Joab. But those are the heroes that helped David pull it off. Holding David up. Is that your ministry? Praise God. You're not in the limelight. You keep those that are in that front line work there. You're in the trenches, putting it together, encouraging and ministering and supporting and giving. I never knew the man, but my life was indirectly shaped by him because he was such a builder of men. His name is Dawson Trotman, founder of the Navigators. Trotman spent his life for people, just building them. Trotman died suddenly at Scroon Lake up in New York on a boat. Took a quick turn and he suddenly dumped out of the boat, and this fine statesman swam around as best he could and paddled up to a girl and lifted her up, and then he went under. And Larson, who was on the boat, said later, the entire United States Navy could not have saved Dawson Trotman that day. It was his time. The widow knew nothing of it on the shore. Her name is Lila. She was walking along the shoreline when the boat arrived, panic-stricken. They couldn't get him. They had no net. They had no way of pulling him in. They came to the shoreline, and one man came running toward Lila, saying, "Lila, Doss is gone. He's gone." And she calmly said, "Our God is in the heavens. He has done whatever he's been pleased to do." Billy Graham had the funeral. What a funeral. He had it because Dawson Trotman was the man that did his first follow-up work. He was the first one to say to Billy, I believe in you, and I'll follow up all those brand new people that come forward. Graham preached the funeral. Time magazine was there. A week later, they had a picture of him in the paper, in the magazine. Had a caption under it, Dawson Trotman, always holding somebody up. That is a friend, a sheltering tree. Let's bow together. It just may be that the Lord has just told you enough in the lives of all these no-names to say, that's my calling for you. You be among the support personnel. You be the one that hauls the food. You be the one that runs the errands. You be the one that makes those calls and goes down those hospital hallways and stops off in those rooms and loves those people back to health. You be the giver. You be the one that holds them up. Forgive us, our great God, for our understanding of the Christian life. We have really missed it. We put the glory in the lap of men. We highlight a few rather than giving you the glory and saying thank you to those that make those few lives possible. We're so enamored of the lights, the headlines, the Davids, and we forget the Ittites and the Abiathars and the unknowns. People like us. Thank you very much, Lord, for those sheltering trees that have loved us through the hard times. In Jesus' name, amen.
The preceding message, Friends in Need, was copyrighted in 1978, 1988, 1997, and 2009. And the sound recording was copyrighted in 2009 by Charles R. Swindoll, Inc. All rights are reserved worldwide. Duplication of copyrighted material for commercial use is strictly prohibited.